we're going to be talking about a very interesting subject with our guest editor today. And this is a quote from him. "Trying to be mates with a son generates a generation of feckless and lazy boys without the skills, self-discipline or motivation to be well-rounded adults." This is the view of Barnady Lenon, who is the former headmaster of one of England's top boarding schools, Harrow.
Good afternoon, Barnaby. Welcome to Five
hello.
Live.
Hi, good afternoon.
So, the question you want to ask our esteemed audience is what?
Are dads making a mistake trying to be best friends with their sons?
Oh, love that question. That is going to get so many people talking. 85058 is the text number. Do get in contact with us. You can also email us at afternoonedition@bbc.co.uk. We would love to hear from you. We would love to know what you think of Barnaby's question. Are fathers making a mistake trying to be best friends with their sons? Perhaps you have a friend like this and you see the way he interacts with his son and you think, he's not your mate. There's no boundaries. Now, why is it, Barnaby, that you wanted to ask this question? What has been building up inside of you over these years, seeing, of course, being at Harrow, lots and lots of boys on their own?
Yeah, so what's been building up with me is the growing understanding that I think we've all got that boys are underachieving compared to girls. And the situation is getting worse. So, you know, if you look at the GCSE results last summer or the A-level results, look at university entry, where this year about a third of boys have got to university compared to almost half of girls. It's a huge, and as UCAS, the university organisation, has said, growing gap. And then, just last week, the Office for National Statistics published data about 25 to 34-year-olds who are still living at home with their parents. And 70% of all those young people who are still living at home with their parents are boys. So even though, on average, young men earn more than young women, so this is not just about house prices, although that's obviously a part of it, there's something also about young men, 25 to 34-year-olds, failing to launch, failing to get out, get a job, establish themselves. So we know that, in this country there's a lot of talk about the difference between poor and rich families, the difference between different ethnic groups, but there's not so much focus on the difference between boys and girls, and yet the difference is very stark, it's growing, and one of the possible reasons for that, we might come on to others, but one of the possible reasons is that authority has been transferred from parents to children in the past 50 years, and boys are paying the price. And sometimes dads are trying too hard to be boys' best friends instead of being good parents as they used to be.
How did boys and girls, but boys in particular in this case then, wrest authority from those that previously had it from their parents?
Well, I don't think they did wrest it. I think parents gave it up. I mean, there's been a kind of a loss of faith in the traditional concept of the parent as someone who, by their actions, determines how a child grows up. There's been less focus on the job of a parent being a good role model. And it's it all ties in with the greater liberalisation of society, which I think is in many ways something we all welcome. But, it's now established that children have rights, that the parents are not quite sure how to discipline children or even whether they're allowed to discipline children. It's a less responsible world with a greater emphasis on individualism and less responsibility for others. And I think that parents need to be reminded that they have a responsibility to show love to their children by establishing boundaries. And certainly, in my experience as a school teacher for 40 years, boys like boundaries. They like responsibility. I'm not in any way saying that fathers shouldn't be friends or have friendship with their children, but at the same time, they mustn't forget that there are such things as rules and routines in a family which are very, very important. I'm not in any way suggesting that parents and fathers
go back to the Victorian age.
Yeah, they shouldn't be dictatorial, they shouldn't be harsh or petty or shouty. I'm not suggesting any of those things. But I'll just give you one example, that when I say, when parents say to me, oh, headmaster, my son spends so much time on his computer, And I say to them, well, why don't you take the computer away? Or why don't you have rules in your family which controls the amount of time that your children spend on computers? They look at me as if I'm mad.
Well, could that be partly to do with the fact that they've put their child in a boarding school? So when their child is actually at home with them, perhaps an element of guilt comes into that they overcompensate.
I don't think so. I mean, in the last 5 years, I've been working mainly with day pupils, and it's exactly the same there.
Right. Can I ask you, Barnby, do you think some of this is to do with, and I'm going to have to generalise here, but certainly my parents' generation, fathers didn't really have the emotional language to be able to connect with their children the same way I connect with my son. So perhaps we are overcompensating for the fact that we found some of our fathers to be a little bit more distant and a little bit less emotional. And now we've gone perhaps too far the other way.
Yeah, I think that for some people of your generation, that might well be the case. And we wouldn't want to go back to a world where fathers were unable to display love for their children. I mean, that's that's clear. But the question is, have we gone too far the other way? And are fathers setting out to be friends with their sons at the expense of the other things which matter just as much, particularly for boys? The establishment of clear rules and routines.
You are our guest editor today, Barnaby, so we've got plenty of people for you to have a conversation with over the next hour. We have Alison Ryan, who's a senior policy advisor at the Association of Teachers and Lecturers. We also have Dr. Amanda Gummer, who is a psychologist from Fundamentally Children, and they specialise in child play and development. And Tim Dowling is with us too, a writer and a dad of 3 boys. He's written a book brilliantly titled Dad, You Suck. Just because you
Awkward
wrote
Father's Day gift.
Simply because you have such a great title for your book, Tim, I'll start with you.
Okay.
You say it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can easily have a bit of both here with your son. Is that right?
Well, I think these days it's quite hard to have one or the other. I think children are desperate to question authority, and if you don't provide that service, which I do brilliantly, I allow them to undermine my authority all the time. I don't know where else they would learn it. Most of what we talk about in terms of discipline these days does come from school. And while as a parent I'm afraid to undermine that, and I do support it, I think at the end of the day, when they've been sort of pushed from pillar to post and they're exhausted by structure and discipline, it's quite hard for me to come in and just give them a heaping extra measure of it. I do try. I mean, I don't want to. I'm happy to be the bad guy.
Barnaby, do you recognise this as a voice of a parent that you might have spoken to in the past?
Yeah, that's a typical parent talking.
Go ahead.
In other words, they're leaving the discipline to the schools and absolving themselves from any responsibility, the responsibility of being a parent.
Oh, that's a bit harsh.
Okay,
Tim, how do you react to that?
That is a bit harsh. I mean, as I said, I don't not do discipline, and I'm happy to be a tremendous source of disappointment to my children. And of course, they do crave discipline. They, my son will sometimes come into the room and say, "So I'm off to that illegal rave now," and you can see in his eyes that he wants you to say, "You can't go," and you say, "You can't go," and he just goes, "Oh, thanks." He does need that antidote to peer pressure, because I think that rules so much of his life as well.
Right, let's speak to Noel in Wembley, who's got in contact with us. Noel, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for calling in. How old's your son?
How old is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's 31.
Okay, 31. Let's rewind to when he was a child and still at school. Were you the disciplinarian? Were you good cop or were you bad cop?
I would say I was both, but I'll explain why. Because myself growing up, I had disciplined parents. My dad was very much a disciplined person. So because of that, I made a mistake that I didn't want my child to be treated as strictly as I was. I wanted to be his mate. And I'll emphasize as well that I'm talking about a black family.
Yes.
So that discipline was something that I looked at. It was good discipline as I look back at it, because I'm a disciplined person. But the one thing I decided, I wanted to be more of a friend.
What did you do, Noel? What did you do, what did you not do in terms of discipline that your father would have done?
I think it was it was instilling in me that the need to be a working person and a person who looks after his, having a job and having a trained job was very important in my dad's eyes. That I went through an apprenticeship. Okay, now when my son was in school, I would represent him all the time as a parent, but I was just very nice in the fact that he was going to school. I was representing him at the parents' evening and things like that, and allowed the school more to get on with it. I can honestly say that I wasn't that forceful in trying to achieve what the school was probably pushing him to do.
Would you say your son is more successful than you?
No, I would not say that at all.
What happened?
Go on.
What happened, though? What happened as a result of the choices that you made early on, do you think?
Well, I think he took his school, especially when exam time's coming, he underachieved from an exam point of view. Mm-hmm. He underachieved badly from an exam point of view. And if I'm sounding ungrateful, it will sound even more when I say that we have a very good relationship as father and son. But I look at it and I think, yeah, it would have been an excellent one had he achieved academically for myself.
Any regrets?
Yeah, well, I've got two other sons now, and you can be sure that they are very much academically minded because of my wife as well, who's a teacher, and we push for that. We push for that with no doubt whatsoever.
So with your other sons, you've become more like your dad?
Yeah, but I'm more experienced now because
Right.
I've become more of both. I'm more input. I'm more rounded in that I'm very much up in their education, but I make it fun to be a part of their education, as well as pushing with what they need to, obtain, as well as everything else as a father going around with his son and doing all kind of things that I get involved with.
So you've learnt through experience, Noel. Well, listen, it's lovely to speak to you, and thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Much appreciated.
That's no problem.
Cheers.
Thanks, have a good afternoon.
You
Okay,
too,
bye.
mate.
You too.
Thank you.
You too.
The phone number's 0808 5909 693 at BBC5 Live if you're on Twitter, or 85058 on the text. You can just text us. We can ring you back if you like and get you on the programme. We would love to hear all your views. Our guest editor today is Barnaby, and his question is, are dads making a mistake trying to be best friends with their sons? Barnady Lenon, former headmaster of Harrow. What did you make there, Barnaby, of what Noel had to say, and having learned through experience and doing things differently with his next two sons?
Well, I thought that was really interesting. I mean, first of all, he said that his own father had placed a lot of emphasis on the idea of him getting a good job, getting good qualifications so that he could get a good job. And, there is a feeling now that too many young men have lost sight of that idea that, one of their aims in life should be to get qualifications to get a good job. They no longer see themselves as being, a future breadwinner. And to some extent, men have been emasculated, actually, in this country. Middle-class women are now achieving much more highly than men, and in many professions are taking a high proportion of the jobs. Many working-class families break down, which means that the woman is left being responsible for the children. And there isn't the kind of encouraging narrative, if you like, for men that there is for women and for ethnic minorities. So I thought he touched on an interesting point there. And secondly, I thought well done to him for changing his position so that he now approaches parenting from a rounded point of view. And I think that's dead right. In other words, he's saying he's being strict now with his younger children, but he's trying to inject an element of fun into it. In other words, he's not just being a disciplinarian in the family, he's something else. And that's great. I mean, that's what we're all looking
Those
for.
two boys are going to get it, aren't they? You just know they are really going to get it from Noel.
But he's feeling, he's feeling guilty, isn't he? He's
is.
feeling guilty that he's let his older son down.
But you've got to be careful then, aren't you, not to sort of overreact, overcorrect, as it were, and go too far the other way. But you're right, it sounds like he's on the right track. Do you know who I'd love to hear from today? If there's a young man out there listening today who is best friends with his dad and feels it's either wonderful or that he wishes he had a few more boundaries, we would absolutely love to hear from you on the programme. 85058 is the text number. Dr. Amanda Gummer from Fundamentally Children, just from what you've heard so far, what do you make of this debate, of this question that we shouldn't be too chummy with our kids, particularly fathers with their sons?
It's all about balance, isn't it? And I think children do need boundaries, but they need a few sort of firm boundaries, and they need consistency. And I think if children know where they are, it's beneficial for the family, because everybody knows that there's consistency around what's applied and what's sort of let go. But it's really valuable for their mental health growing up, because they get that sense of belonging. They know where they fit. They know when they're kicking against the boundaries. And children, as they grow up, will want to do that. But the boundaries have to be in place for them to push against. And that's all part of them developing their sense of self and their own personality and their own value system. And we start by giving children a frame of reference about what is good and what is bad and what is acceptable and what is not. And actually what we want to do is, by the time they've grown up past their sort of puberty and adolescence, they should have internalized that themselves so that they can choose for themselves. They can make their own decisions. And if you don't have strong role models for parents, if parents aren't strong role models for their children are going to struggle to find that sort of to develop their own frame of moral reference.
What kind of influence can a mother have if it's a mother on her own and there isn't a father involved in the upbringing of the child, to bring what perhaps a father brings to this equation, Amanda?
Well, I think for me, it's about parenting, and there are, I think there are traits that are more masculine and more feminine, or that fathers tend to sort of exhibit. But generally speaking, consistent boundaries, whether it's from a mother or a father, is what we're talking about here. And I think the only difference that I've noticed, and this is in the research we've done with preschool children, is that boys need that rough and tumble play, and that's often how they develop some really important social skills. And fathers tend to be more lenient or have a higher threshold of when they stop that play. So being able to have that rough and tumble play when children are young and need to get rid of that energy, and having parents who accept that happens and don't label that as bad behaviour, giving those children the boundaries, but that are realistic. Whereas I think there is a tendency for some mothers to overprotect their children and not want any kind of play fighting or anything. And that then doesn't give the children anywhere to go with that energy and that kind of need for them to explore that side of their development.
Barnaby, can I ask you how you would describe the emotional relationship between you and your own father?
Yeah, I would say that it was that happy combination of, on the one hand, well, let's say three things. One is he supported my mother. Okay, I mean, in my family, the mother was around more than the father.
Was she a working mother?
She worked some of the time,
right.
And she had 4 sons, which I was the oldest, and I think, obviously an very important role for a father is to support the mother, and for the two parents to be working, along exactly the same lines, and secondly, he certainly did establish the rules, routines and expectations in our family, and we were happy to go along with that. But thirdly, he made a lot of time actually in his life to be with us, to take us on holiday, to go out at the weekends, and to exhibit friendship. He was not, incidentally, especially pushy about academic work. That's one thing when I think back. But nevertheless, we kind of got the point that he'd been a hard-working pupil himself at school, university, and that we were kind of expected to be the same. But he wasn't actually very pushy. I mean, I can't remember him ever saying, you've now got to go up to your room and do work. But we were happy.
Can you remember how
to
you pushed boundaries with him? Because we all push boundaries.
Yeah,
with
of
our parents,
course, certainly. Certainly. So when I was a teenager, I pushed boundaries all the time, and I would say that my parents responded well, actually, which is that they made it clear that they disapproved if I did something that they didn't like. particularly when I was sort of 16, 17, 18, going out very late and so on. But they avoided actually ever getting into a serious row. They expressed their views, explained why what I was doing was wrong, explained the effect that it had on them, if you like, that they didn't like it, but avoided getting into a blazing row. And I think, that's what parents need to do. That's what school teachers do.
Let me just interrupt you there. I want to give the numbers out for people to get in contact with us. 85058 is the text number. You're listening to the voice of Barnady Lenon, former headmaster of one of England's top boarding schools. 85058 on the text, or you can give us a call, 08085 909 693. You can also, of course, tweet us at BBC5 Live. Barnaby, do you want to just give us another, just remind us of what the question is that you're asking of our audience today?
Yeah, the question this afternoon is, are dads making a mistake trying to be best friends with their sons?
Let's bring Alison in. Alison Ryan, Senior Policy Advisor at the Association of Teachers and Lecturers. Alison, paint the picture of what's happening in classrooms for us right now. What are teachers telling you? And do you get the impression from them that overly friendly parents are making your life more difficult?
Well, it's interesting. It's not really something that has come up from our members, who are both teachers and support staff from early years up to further education. What we hear far more is about pressures on pupils and real worry about mental health issues in pupils and the pressures and stress that they're facing. And interestingly enough, though, when we ask the question why pupils feel under pressure, actually over half did cite lack of parental support. So that was quite interesting. However, we've also done surveys where if they encounter behaviour problems in the children and young people they teach, also a significant percentage also can suffer some problems, either verbal or physical assault from parents. So that tends to be where our members' obviously concerns mostly are. What they find in terms of what works in schools is about strong partnerships between school and home. So very clear understandings of what the school rules are, whether they're in the school itself or in the environs, and kind of building those relationships, which is why this is a really interesting conversation. But in a school, you couldn't start from the premise of you're getting it wrong, because if you start any relationship from a point of view of pointing a finger at one side or other, that tends to set the relationship off to a rather rocky start.
So what do you think of Tim saying that, the kids go to school, they get loads of rules heaped upon them, and he's there to just give them a bit of a chill time after the draconian day they've had at the hands of people like yourself?
I think there's a good point in terms of, we know at the moment the amount of homework, for example, or the amount of home study that children, young people are expected to do can often be really quite heavy on top of, and I speak also as a mother of a 13-year-old boy, so I'm speaking both for my members and as a parent. You can see them come home with it. They have long days, a very overloaded curriculum. They're always thinking of the next test. We are probably one of the most tested countries, and all those things have a huge impact on kids. And there is a feeling, I think, from a lot of parents thinking, well, I want to give them some playtime. And of course, what's slightly complicated is for a lot of working parents, you might be coming home for the last couple of hours before your children, especially the younger children, are going to bed. So all these things, I think, are complex. So I think for our members, they feel the frustration and they feel, I think, the anxiety sometimes. But they know what works is to actually meet the parents where they are, meet the children where they are, find out what the needs are, think about where support could be given, what kind of resources and understanding might better support, if you like, better practice. But I think we have to be careful about pointing fingers, because most of the time people get defensive and they'll shout something right back at the school, really.
The question that Barnady Lenon is asking today is, are fathers making a mistake trying to be best friends with their sons? Thank you so much for all of your texts. John says all parents should have to attend assertiveness courses. Most important responsibility we can have. There's no proper training or preparation. Dave says, I certainly think you can have both. I'm 36. My son is 11. He's one of my best friends and we do a lot together, football, homework, gaming, etc., etc. But at the same time, I disappoint discipline him. He knows when he's on the wrong, or in the wrong, I think that's supposed to be, and takes the discipline when it's needed. It's about respect. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody. We're going to carry this on.
You're listening to a BBC 5 Live podcast.
If you like this, you might also like this.
The 5 Live Consumer Team, featuring Martin Lewis.
Does it have to be this complicated? Sometimes I make it more complicated because I want to dot all the I's and T's.
To find out more about our range of podcasts, click, tap or swipe bbc.co.uk/5live.
Barnady Lenon is our guest editor today. Trying to be mates with a son generates a generation of feckless and lazy boys without the skills, self-discipline or motivation to be well-rounded adults. Barnaby, you're asking the question today about fathers becoming too close to their sons, being too matey with their sons, and whether or not that is a good thing. Is that a mistake? Define being a best friend with your son. When does it go too far?
It goes too far when, because you've set out to be their best friend, you're unable to impose rules and routines. You're unable to withstand a clash with your son. You're unable to do what all good parents are supposed to do, as the earlier speaker said, and that is establish boundaries, even if they're boundaries that they push against. Because, you see, teenage boys are risk takers. Everyone knows that. They love risks. They love, to some extent, hedonism. But they also actually quite like rules and routines. And parents are losing sight of that fact. They're losing the sense of authority that they would have had in the past. And they need to be encouraged to turn back to being parents as they used to be.
Dr. Amanda Gummer, psychologist from Fundamentally Children, at what age is it too late to then impose boundaries?
I think it becomes, it's a habit, isn't it? So it's something that if you start early enough, children get used to understanding when a parent says no and means no, and what things are flexible. I think if you've never impose boundaries and you're listening to this and go, actually, I think there's some work I need to do in my family to re-establish the sort of the status quo, then I think the best way to do that is by collaboration and consensus, and actually sitting down and explaining to your children why you're unhappy with the status quo and what it is that isn't working for you. And things like agreeing, screen time limits or agreeing curfews for when you come in, and explaining to the children why that's important for you to have that, or for them to have that, and what it is that you want to achieve, and then collaborate and discuss it with your older children so that they feel like they're being listened to and valued. And that way you've got a kind of a contract that you both sign up to. I think that's the way to instill, to regain some ground if you feel like you have kind of lost control of your children.
Carl is in Leeds. Hello, Carl.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good, thank you. And yourself?
I'm good. You've got a 6-year-old son. Is he your mate?
I'd like to think that we're friends, but he certainly understands that I'm his father, and that there are definite rules to our relationship with regards to how we interact and what is acceptable.
Are you the disciplinarian?
I'd say, yeah, I do take the role of disciplinarian within the family.
Ah, okay. So then are those boundaries that you set, are they undermined by your partner who's less disciplinarian than you? I don't wish to cause a rift in your relationship live on national radio, but...
No, she's listening, so I'll be
careful. Oh, right, okay, yeah, be careful what you say there, Carl, mate.
Yeah.
No, they're certainly not undermined. I think having my partner there allows me to have some of the softer side of things. And at times when I question whether maybe I'm being too disciplinarian, she's there to remind me that, ultimately he's a child, and there are things that he's still learning, and you can't expect him to understand every boundary that's set out. But,
so what rules
never does she... Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead. Sorry, I stopped you in mid-flow. Never does she what?
Okay. Never does she override what I say. If there is an instance where maybe she doesn't agree with what I've said, then we will talk about it separately from my son, and then go back and review if necessary.
Yeah, you'll get the quick. Can I have a word with you, please, in the other room? Yeah, I know that.
That's it, yeah.
I know that one. So you set rules on what? What kind of boundaries do you put in place for your 6-year-old, Carl?
We're very specific on bedtimes. Certainly on a Monday to Friday basis at school nights. We try to remain tight around tablet usage, computer usage, and just generally overindulgence of anything really. We try to make sure that he understands the concept of limitation really, and that there's overindulgence isn't a great thing for anything, whatever that may be.
Do you play fight with your 6-year-old?
I'd say we don't play fight. I remember play fighting when I was younger, and we certainly don't have any form of that. We maybe have a little bit of wrestling, which is more grabbing and rolling about,
right?
But certainly not striking, boxing, or anything like that. It's more just a more tickling.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. A little bit more gentle. You haven't set up a cage or anything. That's good to hear, Carl. Good to hear.
No.
Good to hear. Carl, thank you very much indeed. Ralph is in Surrey.
Hi.
Hello, Ralph. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Just
17-year-old son.
17-year-old son, yeah, who I feel I'm very close to, who lives with me. And retrospectively, I think you can set your boundaries in different ways. And there's this great emphasis on your guy who's like leading the program here about achievement and success, and also the guy that said he was asked, "Is your son more successful than you?" And he said no, and that's a regret. I mean, let's define success and achievement with your children. It doesn't have to be academia. They can choose different types of careers. They can choose lifestyle careers. You can still be close to your son and all the way through his life, and you can have that respect between you. It doesn't have to be all discipline, and it's just getting to know that person.
Do you know what it was, though, with Carl, who we spoke to before? Sorry, it wasn't Carl, was it Noel? When we spoke to Noel, he was, as I am, from an ethnic minority, Ralph, and there is an emphasis put on us kids of ethnic minority parents to say, you must do better than us, you must achieve something more than we achieved. We do feel that. That's not to say...
Achieving in what way, though?
Well, it is professional, I've got to say. I mean,
you've got to achieve professionally.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of sense that we were given growing up.
Pocket in the southwest of Surrey, it has the worst self-harm percentages in the country. And a lot of that is expectation of achieving academic success from their parents.
Barnaby, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that, actually. I mean, it's very important that parents don't overemphasise the importance of exams. I mean, it's a difficult thing to say at this time in the year when, hundreds of thousands of pupils are approaching exams. And I'm sure that parents have been very anxious, are they doing enough work and so on. But I would say that, at this time of the year, it's best to leave schools to sort that out and for parents to just be sort of warmly encouraging, while at the same time ensuring that their children are eating well and getting a decent night's sleep. That's very important for them. But in general terms, I completely agree that it's difficult it's wrong for individual parents to overemphasise exams, which, as your caller has said, are not the only thing or even the main thing which matters in life. However, I just remind you of my starting point in this programme, which is that boys are doing much worse than girls in public exams and in terms of university entry. Do we think that boys are less intelligent than girls? No, we don't. So there must be a problem there, a boy problem, which is worth at least thinking about.
Ralph, have you thought about that?
Yeah. The fact that it's a boy problem.
Does that strike you?
I've been a Samaritan, okay, and I've taken calls from teenagers. I've been to festivals and had groups of teenagers sit around me as a Samaritan and hear them say the distance between themselves and their parents is just massive. There's no such thing as being a friend. Their parents are at work all day. For a start, they work in London. They come home, they don't speak to them. There's no such thing as being a close friend. They isolate them, and then there's this expectation, whether it's boys or girls. The self-harming is ridiculous in this area. How can you justify not being a friend to your child?
Can I say this is a very interesting train of thought, because somebody else has tweeted this. Could this over-familiarity you speak of come from guilt at never being around due to have to work every hour just to make ends meet? That is a valid point, isn't it, Barnaby?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is a sense that parents that are never there may overcompensate for that by being over-friendly with their children.
It's not over-friendly, it's false.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I agree with that.
The whole thing is gone.
Yeah.
It's either checkbook parents or, that's what they think they do. When they do see them, they just splash out and they ask them how, I listen to them and they ask them, how's school going? That's about it.
Yeah.
There's an expectation.
Okay, so there are two things that we could take from this. One is that it's very difficult to be a successful parent if you can't make some time for your family. That must be true. And secondly, there are too many parents who the only thing they talk about with their children is how they're getting on at school. And there's more to life than that. That's fine.
So have you been friends with your teenagers?
Who? Me personally?
Yeah, your children. Have you got teenagers?
Yeah, but I've only got daughters, and they're not
daughters. And have you been close to them as a best friend?
Yeah, I've been friendly with them while establishing rules and routines, which is what we're I think probably all agreeing.
Are you basing your academic failure on these boys? Are you basing that on the fact that you're a headmaster?
No.
Or a father?
No. So what I'm saying is that the statistics tell us that boys are doing much less well than girls, and in terms of university entry, the gap is widening. And the purpose of our discussion this afternoon is to explore, at least one of the reasons why that might be the case. Clearly, there could be many different reasons.
Yeah,
one thing.
Surely, could one of those reasons be that people are befriending their sons and saying, look, make lifestyle choices. I've helped my son choose his A-levels in view of the fact that he isn't massively academic, but they will help him then make a choice, his choice, and I verify that it's his choice then what he chooses to do. And whether that isn't massive achievement, success in inverted commas, then so be it, because I think it's much more important in this life for them now to be happy with the amount of pressure that's on them.
Ralph, you aware, and we've done a show on this before, about the plight of white working class boys, academically, certainly. Almost every ethnic minority group of boys does better at GCSEs than white working class boys. So is there something to learn from ethnic minorities about their, whatever the parenting happens amongst the African boys, British Asian boys, British Chinese boys? Because there clearly are some statistics that would say that these groups are doing better academically.
Okay, but we're talking, my argument is better academically, yeah, but you mentioned academia and achievement in the same breath and success.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, actually, that the experience that I've come across, and having hosted a show on the BBC Asian Network for many years, was that it wasn't just about academic achievement. It could, I mean, there's lots of doctors and lawyers in the Asian community, but it's also about business acumen, for instance. So starting up a business when you're 16 or 18 or whatever. So it is, but it is achievement linked to not emotional achievement.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, I think probably because like your previous callers at Noel, he and his closeness to his sons now and wanting them to achieve. Yeah, I think you're right. Whereas in the pocket of Surrey that I live, there is definitely a distance from the white working class and the upper class from the parents to their children.
Fascinating call.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you. Fascinating. Thank you.
Ben's on the line as well. Has given us a call, 085 909 693. And a question that we're asking today, or rather I should say Barnady Lenon is asking, is are fathers making a mistake trying to be best friends with their sons? Ben, what do you think?
Do you know what? If I'm not my son's best friend in the next 10 years, I don't think, I've done my job correctly as a dad and as a professional that works with young people. With everything that's happened with a lot of people today, you could coast your life through school, not be picked up there, coast your life through at home and not be picked up, and there could be certain issues that, my son could be hiding from me. But if I have that appropriate kind of friendship with him, not just as a dad, but, as someone that he can, learn behaviours from, learn skills, not just as a father role, but as a working male. I'll kind of want to give him, every bit of expertise that I can show him. Obviously I'm going to make mistakes along the way, but at least he can learn that I can make mistakes, which is okay for him.
Ben, how does your parenting style differ from your own father's?
I always had that kind of thing, well, my dad did this, so I'm not going to do that. But then I can kind of, look at why he did certain things 15, 20 years ago, which I can still implement with my kids. But I have to, I have to change it up and, make sure that, the mistakes that I did do, I can kind of, let my son know that this is the consequences. So yeah, we both got, different types of parenting, and I'm still learning. I'm still a young dad. There's no manual.
How old's your son?
So I've got a 5-year-old son now. I've got a daughter who's 10. And I've got another daughter in Scotland who's 8 as well.
Right. And what were the parts of your father's style of parenting that you've definitely just kicked to the curb?
Well, for one, he was a weekend dad.
Okay.
So I never
wanted to be that.
Monday,
right.
Yeah, I never had that Monday to Friday role of a father figure. So I will try and do as much quality time spending with my son. I work all God's known hours, trying to keep my family going. I've been through that lifestyle where, we was doing nothing, and I want to take our family to the next level. So, I feel that I'm selfish by not being there for certain things in his school time, watching him read, but I can do the homework with him. I can, keep up to it. So, yeah, it's totally different.
Ben, thank you very much for your call. It's great to talk to you. Thanks a lot. 0808 5909 693. Just got a couple more minutes if you want to get your voice heard on this subject. Tim Dowling, wanted to go back to you because you are the dad of 3 boys. You're also a writer. And to remind anybody who missed the start of the programme, your book is called Dad, You Suck.
That's right.
Do they genuinely view you as just a soft touch? But they must love that about you in some ways as well.
I am. I would, compared to my wife, I am definitely a soft touch. So I am the sort of first resort for things that they know she's going to say no to. But then, of course, I know that I'm going to get in trouble for doing it. So I have to.
Been there, done that.
Okay.
When did this start for you? Right from the beginning, you just wanted to let them kind of have their own freedom to roam when they were very little, and it just kept going. What happened?
I'm not sure they're going to recognise this picture of me as this hugely chilled out, rule-hating guy. But. I think I always had, but I think the most important thing is to have a united front. That as a pair of parents, you behave the same way for your children, you have the same rules, and you're consistent in the application of those rules. And that any discussion you have about how badly the other person is doing should take place elsewhere. But what I would call my light touch parenting, and my wife calls just doing nothing, is
so clearly not a united front then.
It's very much. I remember what it's like to be a 14-year-old boy, and I know that they need to sort of settle their sibling hash on their own in a big way. So I do let those kind of fights go on longer than she would, because she can't stand the noise or the irritation or the sort of the way they swear at each other. But I'm sort of okay with that, because I think they will never stop doing that if you play referee the whole time.
What is your partner's attitude to swearing then?
She's very keen on it, as it happens.
Not at you. No. I'm talking about your kids.
Personally, she likes it. She's for someone who swears a lot, she does shout, "Stop swearing" at them a lot.
Whereas you let that go.
The worry is obviously that it will leave the house and they will swear in inappropriate situations. But they don't. We're much more careful about it when they were small. And they've learned. They know when it's okay and when it isn't. And obviously, all my children will live in a future where social norms will be slightly different. And so I'm trying to train them for that, not for now.
Barnaby, your final thoughts?
I think that children need love, and the best way of showing that is by providing structure, rules and boundaries, not by always trying to please them.
What do you make of what you've heard today from the men who've called this programme?
Well, I agree with much of what they've said, but I'll just say one thing, and that is that I now meet men who are in their 30s and 40s who I taught, 10, 20 years ago, and they very often say to me, they're very grateful for the fact that I was quite a strict school teacher. Thank you, they say, for being so strict. I was a lazy boy. You made me work. And through that discipline, I learnt to work. And that's been of value to me in my life.
Yes, but there's a difference, isn't there, between being a teacher and being a father, clearly.
There
in
is.
terms
And being a boarding school, of course,
Yeah,
where you
of
would be
course.
taking on the role of father, I guess, much more so than their own father.
There is, but I think that many children would look back on their own parents and think, well, I'm glad that my parents are quite strict about these things, and I'm going to be, the same with my children.
Okay, we've got lots of texts as well. Barnaby, thank you so much for raising this question. Lots of people wanting to get in contact with this. Robin Worthing said, we have an 11-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. I do call my son mate, but absolutely do not think you should be proper mates. I'm convinced clear boundaries make children happier in the long run and some distance is essential.
Big thanks to Alison Ryan, who's Senior Policy Advisor at the Association of Teachers and Lecturers. Thank you, Alison. And Dr Amanda Gummer, psychologist from Fundamentally Children. And Tim Dowling, thank you very much, Tim. Lovely to talk to you, writer and dad of 3 boys. I'm just going to say it one more time. He's written a book called Dad, You Suck. And Barnady Lenon, our guest editor on the programme today, former headmaster at Harrow. Barnaby, thank you very much indeed.
You may help my wife co-write Husband, You Suck at some point in the future, Tim.
What makes you think she hasn't already written it?
Well, she hasn't had it published. She might need it to be proofread by Tim.